Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to establish a national body to promote and enforce packaging reduction, to make provision for the disposal of packaging by certain retailers, to establish binding targets for the reduction of packaging and for connected purposes. Packaging is part of our everyday lives. It protects the products we buy, provides information to the consumer and acts as a marketing tool to boost sales. Much packaging is essential. You'd have a problem getting your pint of milk or baked beans home without it. But much of it is not. Even in our environmentally conscious times, packaging has recently been growing, not falling. We now send 5 million tonnes of packaging to landfill every year. We need to take a serious look at the packaging that fills our supermarket shelves and ask how much of it is necessary and how much is wasteful, needless and excessive. In both economic and environmental terms, packaging comes at a price. Families spend around £470 per year on packaging. We see unnecessary packaging every time we visit the supermarket, in the form of shrink-wrapped cucumbers or individually packaged bananas. Often, consumers don't have the option to buy a product without the excessive packaging. And today, the Local Government Association announced that council taxpayers are facing fines of up to £3 billion if we fail to cut the amount of waste thrown into landfill. Consumers are paying 3 times over for excess packaging. We pay the cost of the packaging at the checkout, we pay in increased council taxes and landfill taxes, and we will all be paying the environmental cost of more waste going to landfill for years to come. The Government has taken some, albeit limited, steps to tackle excess packaging. EU regulations on producer responsibilities and the essential requirements of packaging have been adopted into UK law. WRAP, which is the Waste Resources Action Programme, has taken positive steps on research into minimising packaging. However, the Waste Strategy for England, published in May, was a missed opportunity. It includes a handful of measures on packaging, such as higher recycling targets, but no real ideas on how to get to the heart of the problem. It was new targets, but no fresh thinking, and we should be going much further. Supermarkets themselves have taken some steps to cut back on packaging and reduce waste. Sainsbury's came top in a survey I carried out this year of Easter egg packaging for reducing to a minimum the often gross amount of packaging that usually accompanies Easter eggs. Waitrose has taken steps to pilot plastic bag-free stores, requiring customers to bring their own reusable shopping bags. Across government and industry, the movement to curb excessive and wasteful packaging has shown signs of life, but is in serious need of a growth spurt. My bill sets out steps to be taken in 5 areas to cut excessive packaging and reduce waste: reform of the DEFRA's curtailed commitments, augmenting the power of trading standards officers, creating a new national body on packaging, placing responsibilities on supermarkets to tackle the problem, and finally encouraging the reuse of plastic bags. The curtailed commitments are voluntary agreements brokered by DEFRA to reduce packaging levels. 90% of the UK grocery sector is signed up, and they've agreed to stop the growth in packaging waste by next year, 2008, and achieve an absolute reduction in packaging waste by 2010. It sounds very promising, but look below the surface and problems start to appear. In answers to parliamentary questions, I have been told both that each curtailed signatory declares their total packaging use each year, but also that information on the annual total packaging use of each of the signatories is not routinely collected. Which is it? And how are we benchmarking progress towards the targets? Well, another parliamentary answer tells me a draft protocol is being consulted on with a view to it being agreed and implemented in this reporting year. But if we're to start seeing the packaging growth stopped as soon as next year, surely the means of reporting progress should be well established by now. Indeed, how will future success be measured if there isn't already a clear benchmark? This bill proposes that the curtailed voluntary measures are translated into binding targets. Similar steps have already been taken in other EU member states. The curtailed targets are sensible, but we must reinforce the system so they're given genuine priority by companies rather than just lip service. Now, we actually already have legislation against excessive packaging. The problem is it isn't working. In theory, trading standards can combat excess packaging using the Packaging Essential Requirements regulations, which state that packaging volume and weight must be the minimum amount to maintain necessary levels of safety, hygiene and acceptance for the packed product and for the consumer. Since the introduction of these regulations and the predecessor regulations 9 years ago, there have been just 4 prosecutions on excess packaging. I've surveyed the trading standards services around the country, and it's clear that they're finding it very difficult to build a case for enforcement using these regulations. Wiltshire County Council says there are numerous problems with enforcement. West Berkshire Council says these regulations are difficult to enforce given the definition of what is excessive. South Ayrshire says there is little real impact that the regulations are having on reducing the problem. It is far too easy for businesses to show they're complying with these regulations. Product presentation and brand image are taken strongly into account. If the producer can find any evidence that the sales would drop due to a packaging size reduction, they can use packaging larger than necessary. And so we get into a packaging arms race with ever bigger branded boxes jostling for space on supermarket shelves. And the consumer is left to pick up the tab for the packaging and for its disposal. And even if the regulations were well worded, trading standards are told not to bother. The Rogers Review last year stated that policing excess packaging was a non-priority, and no mention was made of packaging in the 2005/6 Central Government Priorities for the Trading Standards Service. The current regulations need technical amendments to prioritise the reduction of excessive packaging over the needs of marketing departments, and government needs to stop ignoring this issue and provide some leadership. My bill calls for the establishment of a national body on packaging to support trading standards. The body would work with trading standards to tackle large-scale producers of excess packaging and offer a more coordinated and systematic approach to the problem. And such a national body could also place more emphasis on proactive packaging enforcement, whereas trading standards tend to act only on specific complaints from the public. If supermarkets and other retailers are to drive change and reduce packaging, the ball must be in their court. They must be given an incentive. Consumers should be empowered to take action and return unwanted packaging to the point of sale. The bill requires large retailers to provide an in-store deposit point for the disposal of excess packaging before the customer leaves the store. Broadly speaking, packaging that can be removed by the customer before he or she leaves the shop is excessive, whereas that which has to stay on to get the product home in adequate condition is necessary. By making retailers take back the excess packaging that they force on consumers, the message is sent loud and clear that if they don't want to deal with it, they shouldn't put it on the shelf in the first place. Disposable plastic bags are a highly visible symbol of wasteful practice by supermarkets. An estimated 17 billion plastic bags are given away annually by UK supermarkets, enough plastic to cover an area the size of London, Liverpool, Manchester, Newcastle and West Yorkshire combined. Some countries have attempted to tackle excessive use of disposable plastic bags by introducing bag taxes. Evidence, however, is mixed about the effectiveness of such a tax. Supporters of the idea point to the example of Ireland, where a 15-cent bag tax resulted in a 90% reduction in plastic bag use. But critics argue that the alternatives to plastic bags are heavier, and the additional carbon emissions from transporting them offset any gains. A better alternative to a plastic bag tax is to require supermarkets to participate in a deposit scheme for carrier bags. This would take the form of a levy paid on a bag at the point of sale, say 10 pence, which would be redeemed when the bag was returned to the store. The charge would encourage customers to use bags sparingly, and in practice, customers bringing the bags back would reuse them until the end of their useful life, when they would redeem the deposit or receive another bag. Attaching a redeemable deposit value to the bags would also create an incentive to reduce plastic bag litter. Mr Deputy Speaker, we face many huge environment challenges, and packaging is just one small but important part of a much bigger environmental picture. Away from this chamber, I have found huge support for my campaign to cut excess packaging. The Independent newspaper and groups like the Women's Institute are running similar campaigns. The reaction has been overwhelmingly positive, both from my constituents and from people who have contacted me from around the country. In a situation like this, where a clear case for action is backed up by strong public support, the onus is on Parliament to act. Both the environmental and the economic costs make this an issue that must be tackled urgently. Now, recently the government has come under some fire for stealing policies from other parties. Now, in the event that my bill doesn't get sufficient parliamentary time in this session to progress to a third reading, I'd just like to invite the Minister to feel free to adopt the good ideas in this bill, and rather than criticising, I promise I'll be delighted. I commend this bill to the House.
The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in her bill. Does the member say aye? Aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Chris Huhne, Susan Kramer, Andrew Stunnell, Norman Baker, John Barrett, Jenny Willett, Peter Bottomley, Bob Spink, Derek Wyatt, Mark Lazarowicz and Mrs Sharon Hodgson and myself, sir.
Joe Swinson.
Packaging reduction.
Second reading what day?
Thursday the 25th of October.
Thursday the 25th of October. We now come to the main business.